The video game that plays you. I'm Jason Horton.
I'm Rebecca Lieb.
And this is Ghost Town.
You're usually the one that corners the market on a video game conspiracy, retro technology, but I found this very interesting case, I guess, about the Polybius. I hope I'm saying that right. It's a video game that may or may not have been that killed people. And it's very rare that we see urban legend proven true-ish, but this has all of that too. So we're going to be talking about the Polybius conspiracy today. Polybius starts as a kind of vintage video game or urban legend in the 2000s, actually. The urban legend goes, Polybius was a mystery arcade game that apparently appeared in several Portland suburbs around 1981. The machine's cabinet body, I guess, was painted entirely black, and it was rumored that the stern-looking men would sometimes visit the arcade where Polybius was placed to collect information from the machine, possibly testing the player's response to its psychoactive effect before disappearing with said information. The game had a strange effect on its players also. It's described as being literally addictive, with lines forming around the machines and fights erupting over who would play next. That doesn't seem that abnormal, but players also supposedly suffered from horrible side effects, including amnesia, insomnia, night terrors, and hallucinations. The company that created the Polybius game, in most accounts of the story, is called, oh boy, here we go, Sinneslotion, which means in German sense delete or sensory deprivation. The word's meanings are derived from the German words Sinne, senses, and Lotion, to extinguish or to delete. Though the way they're combined, this is a bit of a stretch. Rumor has it, so we're taking this one step further, that it was a CIA experiment spun off from MK-Ultra, the psychoactive drug study conducted on unsuspecting subjects, a giant conspiracy collecting data from unsuspecting preteens and teenagers while systemically destroying their minds. Approximately 1 month after its supposed release in 1981, Polybius is said to have just disappeared without a trace. And that's the legend. But is it a legend? Not quite. Let's take a little break. While we still don't know where the Polybius game came from, the earliest confirmed record of it is from an arcade game resource called coinop.org on February 6, 2000. The entry mentions the name Polybius and a copyright date of 1981, although no such copyright has ever been registered. Sometime prior to September 2003, Kurt Koller, the owner of coinop.org, submitted a message to the video game magazine GamePro about Polybius. Polybius then appeared in the September 2003 issue of GamePro magazine, a part of a feature story on video games called Secrets and Lies. This is the first known printed mention of the game. The article declared the existence of the game to be, quote, inconclusive, which of course fed a lot of interest in the game and the mysteries around it. A lot of people believe if Polybius isn't real, that Koller created it to give coinop.org a little bit more traffic, cachet, what have you. After appearing in GamePro, a man named Stephen Roach claimed he had been one of its original programmers and that his company developed a game with very intense and cutting-edge graphics. According to Roach, a boy experienced an epileptic seizure while playing, and the company pulled the plug on the project. Although Roach offered no proof for his claims, his story added details on the gameplay of Polybius, which, again, excited everyone and inspired a spin-off game based on Polybius. But there are some facts, again, you don't see a lot of people come forward about an urban legend. Other facts that are hard to ignore. Brian Dunning, host of Skeptoid podcast, did some investigative work and found that a 12-year-old named Brian Morrow had become sickened during a 28-hour marathon video game contest in Portland in 1981, playing Asteroids. He apparently drank too much soda and experienced some stomach discomfort, I guess. Soon after, 2 other kids all got sick after playing video games in arcades in the Portland area. Michael Lopez got a migraine, the first he'd ever had, from playing Tempest. 18-year-old competitive gamer Jeff Daly died due to a heart attack after chasing the world record in Berserk. 1 year later, 19-year-old Peter Bukowski followed suit, dying in the same way, playing the same game. Just a few days later, Portland area arcades were raided by federal agents who seized cabinets that were being used for gambling. coupled with the existence of a real arcade game named Polyplay, it all feels a little bit more than an urban legend. Pretty convenient, honestly, if you can suspend some disbelief. Says documentarian Brian Ludo, who's trying to make a documentary about the Polybius conspiracy. Back in the early 80s, arcades weren't the safe haven that people think they were. Drugs were a big part of what went on. Gambling was a big thing as well. There were FBI that came up to the Portland area and placed hidden cameras and actually tracked people through their high score initials after they left. So there actually was an FBI raid that people remember. But then they remember that they actually were these men in black figures that would go there as well. So some say they weren't trying to brainwash kids, but they were trying to keep tabs on the arcade. So you've got people seeing these kids getting sick, seeing these busts go down, and seeing this police presence. It's the perfect fertile ground for a conspiracy theory. Furthermore, Polybius exists today as a trademark term for providing online downloadable software for computer games, and has been in use since 2007. A little bit late, but again, you can decide to what extent this urban legend is real-ish or total bullshit.
I've actually spoken to Brian from Skeptoid. Yeah, just a name came up and I was,
Interesting.
It's interesting. He's just a skeptic.
Yeah.
And he's got a really good podcast and such. Makes me think of a couple of things. One is the idea of a video game or some AI collecting information and data. I mean, we do that every single day. Yeah. Right? That's totally. I mean, it has become
not far from the reality.
Where we volunteer that essentially when you say yes to terms of services. Mm-hmm. And just as somebody who kind of grew up playing video games like Tempest and Berserker and Berserk and Pac-Man in the early 80s at the roller rink or something like that was super dangerous. Mm-hmm. It's just, I mean, I don't know, the early 80s, there's...
What wasn't dangerous?
The roller rink was like a Coke, it was a huge like Coke, I don't know, like a trafficking place.
Amazing.
But think about the interesting thing is, when human brains were not necessarily, unless you were like a programmer previous to 1981, human brains weren't like being like, oh, I'm going to be playing a video game. My brain and eyes and synapses and reflexes. It's something that we've learned over the years, and with computers and cell phones, we've essentially rewired everything in a sense to adapt to that. And then, they find ways to psychologically get you to watch more, engage more, whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. So whatever was happening back then is, and I'm sure the adjustment of, looking at a screen and seeing these things happening, you don't know how you're going to react because you never reacted to it before. Mm-hmm. So the fact that people are getting sick or it's affecting them in an adverse way or a way they're at least not expecting seems like pretty legit.
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine having a heart attack after playing a ton of video games? Like, it was new. Like, I'm sure they drank a ton of caffeine and were not taking care of themselves during this giant span of,
going
gaming.
Crazy on tab
nuts. I mean, you can't stop drinking tab if you're playing, if you're a marathon gamer. It doesn't work out that way. But just all of these things. And it feels like it's kind of foreshadowing what we experience now pretty much every day.
Yeah, but we do it voluntarily, knowing that like, oh, this is bad for my posture. This is bad for my eyesight. This is bad for my social interaction. What I'll say is probably one of the few things you can do to combat that is listening to podcasts and really specifically the way there's a perfect synergy of what we're saying, how we're saying it, the tones of our voice that will make you a better person.
Wow.
According to who? According to us.
And then in 1982, we pack up and disappear.